Ooh.
All right.
Tough one. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. I have to say I'm not super excited about reading more of this stuff. It's just, he takes so long to get to the point.
Well, so, I was actually thinking, because I read on into the second and third book, and I was actually thinking maybe we should have done like the third.
Okay.
Because, or even one of the later ones, because it's more of, it's less of this, it's less Socratic, honestly. I mean, it's still, obviously, you have the dialogue style where, he's asking a question to refute things and to find what the ideas are. But it's not quite as, I would say the Republic, the first, so we're talking about the first book of Plato's Republic, right?
Is this episode 11 or 12?
11.2.
Or is this 11.1.2? Like
what? Oh, no, it's 11.2.
Okay. Or like 11A and 11B.2.
I was kind of thinking that we could another option is we do one book and then we come back to the Republic and we slowly work our way through it. Because, there's 10 books.
Right. But that's giving it a lot of weight.
It is. But it's, to be fair, it is a pretty important piece of work that's influenced a lot of people. Even Mussolini read it.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And Weber.
Nice.
And Hegel, and
all the folks.
All the folks. And you can definitely see, so, but I understand it is tough, and
maybe I have a tough translation too, because I did find a few other translations that were a little easier. But.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the basic idea is that they're trying to define justice and understand justice.
Right.
And it's all kind of laid out in the beginning, or at least they start to get into justice, and he refutes 3 definitions of justice, one by Cephalus, one by Thrasymachus, and one by Polemarchus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing those correctly. But and then the second book, you get another definition by Glaucon and this other dude, Adamantus.
Oh, they keep on the justice thing, huh?
They keep on the justice thing, and then ultimately this is how Socrates gets into defining the ideal state, because he's like, well, it's kind of difficult it's kind of funny and kind of interesting. He's like, it's difficult to define justice on an individual level, just like looking at like a really small thing from far away is difficult to see. But so maybe let's try to look at something bigger, and that's how they get into the state talk. And then it's interesting because he basically defines an authoritative state where you have a sort of like, you have a bit of just like, there's a lot of censorship and stuff like that. And that's why I thought the book 3 might be interesting to get your opinion on, because he's talking about how, like, even just ripping into, like, Homer and stuff, how, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I guess probably the easiest way to summarize it would be by talking about the 3 types of justice that are defined.
Sure.
So it starts off Socrates going in and talking to this older guy, Cephalus. Right. And they get into some interesting discussions about death and stuff that we can talk about. I feel like
that's the most interesting part. I was enjoying the beginning.
Right.
And then when we started getting into it's the same thing I had with the apology.
Yeah.
Is I find Socrates' line of questioning to be more confusing than anything, and it doesn't feel like he's hitting home runs to me.
Well, yeah,
it feels like he's asking sort of strange questions that are repetitive and also unclear as to exactly where we've gone.
Well, that's part of it, is that it's like this step-by-step, obviously, process. That's what the Socratic dialogue
right, but that's what I'm saying is it doesn't feel, I'm not following steps. It feels like he says 3 of the same thing, and then he says something that feels completely different to me.
I agree. There are some logical jumps in it.
Even how we got to justice was pretty funny. 'Cause he was talking to the old guy about death and stuff, and then he makes some weird statement like, well, since we're talking about justice, what do you think that is? And I don't remember them really talking about justice. I even have a note that was sort of shoehorned in.
Yeah, no, and I think that might be a translation too, because he's basically talking about Cephalus brings up justice in the idea of like owing, like it's you can live a just life more easily if you're rich,
right?
And that's kind of how it's brought it up. And then Cephalus is like, his definition of justice to tell the truth and return what one has received. And then Socrates refutes this by saying, well, what if you give a knife to somebody and then they go crazy? Or what if somebody gives you a knife, and then they go crazy and want it back? You're not going to give them back the knife. Right. And then Polemarchus comes in and says, well, okay, it's actually to render each his due. And then sort of elaborates like, you should be just to your friends or you should
justice is helping friends and harming enemies.
Exactly. And then Socrates refutes this by saying, well, every time you harm somebody, you're basically creating more injustice, I think is the idea. I
have a few things highlighted that are trying to, let's see. Yeah. Human beings who have been harmed necessarily become more unjust.
That's it.
But are just men able to make others unjust by justice of all things? Or in some, are good men able to make other men had by virtue?
Right. And in no cases is it just a harm.
Right.
Is sort of where Socrates concludes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final one, which is sort of, I guess you could say the most pedantic, or at least they get on the most.
This is where I was just like, I'm out. This is so annoying.
Is Thrasymachus, who himself is kind of annoying too and very aggressive. And sometimes I fear that I have a little bit of Thrasymachus in me too.
Nice.
But he's sort of talking about how justice is it's the advantage of the stronger, basically.
Right.
It's whatever is advantageous to the stronger. Justice is the powerful is kind of how I like to think about it. But then Socrates refutes this by saying, well, what about the stronger are able, what if they make a mistake and then they do what's disadvantaged to themselves? Then that wouldn't be advantageous to them. So
I think he also makes the argument, or seems to be making the argument, that the stronger also don't, or sort of can't, do things that are advantageous to themselves, but can only focus on stuff that is advantageous to those weaker. And that the pilot of a ship, while they're being the pilot of a ship's focus, is on the well-being of the ship and the sailors, the things under its command.
Mm-hmm. Right. And yes, I think so. But I agree.
It was kind of a strange point. It all felt very... It felt distilled. Ideas were distilled to the point of confusion, I think.
Well, this is part of, I think, what they're doing is they're trying to take some of these assumptions that we have and really just look into what's the bedrock of these, which is why I think ultimately, there's debate about, like, Socrates does end up getting somewhere with what justice is, but it's a little bit of a... Is it
in the next book?
No, it's at the very end of this. It's just, justice is virtue and wisdom, and injustice is vice and ignorance.
But then he even says he can't know that.
Yes. He
says, so now that as a result of the discussion, I know that I know nothing.
Exactly. I thought you'd like that.
As long as I do not know what the just is, I shall hardly know whether it is virtue and whether or not one who has it is happy or unhappy.
Right. He says this, and then he starts sort of questioning.
That's the end. That's the last.
Yeah, no, I know. But I think he gets the closest with those, is I guess what my point is. And then yes, you're right. That's why. And then so in the next one, Glaucon comes in and actually kind of makes an interesting point saying, well, we don't have to get there, but it has to do kind of with a social contract of justice, in that commit injustice is a good and to suffer it is an evil, but that the excess of evil in being wronged is greater than the excess of good in doing wrong, so that when men do wrong and are wronged by another and taste of both, those who lack the power to avoid the one and take the other determine that it is for their profit to make a compact with one another, neither to commit nor to suffer injustice, and that this is the beginning of legislation of the covenants between men. So the essential nature of justice is a compromise between the best, which is to do wrong with impunity, and the worst, which is to be wronged and be impotent to get one's revenge. And then they get into this whole thing about how, actually the best, this Glaucon, however you pronounce it, and Adeimantus more specifically gets into this whole thing about how actually the best thing is to appear just, but to actually be unjust. Kind of Machiavellian in a sense. Yeah, but anyway, we don't have to get into that. But yeah, this is why he goes and they build a whole state trying to figure out where justice is and stuff like that.
This reminds me of deconstructionist readings I did in college. People, what was his name? Benjamin Boritz, I think. He tried to what is music? Deconstruct it and rebuild music from the ground up linguistically.
Yeah? How did they do?
I don't know. That's my answer. I have no idea. I'm in the same place as this. Sure. It's at this point where you deconstruct things enough, and then anything can kind of be true.
Sure.
Because there is nothing. So now we're starting from scratch. So you can just say it's this or that.
Yeah. Well, there is one, I think, conclusion he makes, and I think Cephalus is kind of getting at this with the death talk.
Right.
At least I take this as a conclusion.
Right.
And it's the just person is the happy person. And I feel like Cephalus is kind of getting at this when he's talking about, what do you actually care about at the end of life?
Right.
Socrates asked him, kind of, what's it like to be old, basically? And I was also thinking, Socrates is kind of old. I guess he wasn't as old at this point. Yeah. But yeah, Cephalus was just as you get older, you start to you actually think about death and you start to equivocate on all the things that people talk about that comes after death, and then you think about the people you've harmed. And so this is how I think it is kind of building up into this justice discussion, because it's bringing up this idea that as we reach the end of our life, we start to take tally of all the things, all the injustice we've done. And I think that's why ultimately the just person is going to be the happy person, because they will feel that they haven't harmed anybody, I guess, in that sense, if you want to take justice as,
Well, I feel like there's a problem, there's a linguistic problem happening, because we don't know what justice is yet, so how can we say justice is anything?
No, but I agree with that, but sort of taking cues from some of the conclusions that they've made, like the just you're not going to harm. A just person doesn't harm, because harm creates more injustice, as they sort of get into in the Polemarchus discussion.
Right.
And again, I'm not saying this hold, but it sort of it is kind of in line with how I feel. So yeah, but yeah, we kind of touched on this before, that they don't really conclude, right? And even in the end, but yeah, maybe a good jumping off point would be to start talking about what we think justice is.
Sure.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it basically does. I think it's related to fairness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is mostly a buzzword.
Yeah.
I don't think it has a strict meaning. I think it is related to fairness, and people tend to use it when they feel like something is unfair, injustice. Mm-hmm. Or justice would be the opposite. If they feel like something is fair. We want justice means either we want revenge or we want to be treated fairly.
Mm-hmm.
According to what they think fair is.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't know what Socrates would have to say to me about that, but I don't think it's the advantage of the stronger. I don't think it's doing good or bad. I don't think it's about being happy.
Right. Well, I think we can maybe get somewhere by saying justice, it appears to be relative or subjective. Justice is subjective.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that there are plenty of arguments that it isn't. Like, the only person who can deal out justice is God, kind of a thing.
Right. But this is where I also think justice has something to do with consciousness. Right? It's like, does justice exist in the animal kingdom? It requires an observer to make a calculation, and the observer needs to be sentient.
Right. I mean, I think justice, if I think about the word, what I imagine is it has to do with that which is right or in accordance with the will of God or nature or something like that.
Right, but it requires an observer to have a
like a
idea.
Judge.
Yeah, and I mean, this is why I sort of was saying it's relative or subjective, because it's going to depend on the person that's making that judgment.
But we don't treat it, I would say that at least in general parlance, we don't treat it as subjective. We talk about something being just, or like justice or injustice are treated as objective ideas.
That's fine, but that I would say that's theatrical, because it's like of course. I mean, just take the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. I mean, you have both sides that could probably point to a lot of injustices and just acts, and that seems
what
to be.
What do they even mean by? What do they mean by it? What do you think they mean by it?
I think that actually what you were getting at with kind of fairness and revenge,
right,
is actually probably getting kind of close there, because there's an imbalance that has taken place, it seems, that requires rebalancing when justice comes into play. It's like, I don't know if you talk about justice when everything's balanced. It only seems to come into discussion when somebody feels like there's an imbalance.
Right. I mean, that's where the metaphor, the scales of justice.
Right. Yeah. And
they don't talk about that anywhere in this chapter.
Right. But and maybe it precedes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's, I don't know when people started using scales as a metaphor for that.
Right.
No,
but they're not really getting at fairness a little bit with the what is owed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Socrates' example to refute that about how you wouldn't give a crazy person a weapon, even if it's technically their weapon. I think that doesn't really get that muddies the waters of the basic situation, because there is a sense in which what is owed has to do with people sort of engaging on equal footing.
Right, which I feel like is actually why they get into this discussion of the state. Because it's like the discussion of the state, in a sense, the reason it's so authoritative in many ways. I mean, they basically talk about eugenics and, you're like breeding leaders and everything like that. And then you've got the noble lie comes into play and stuff like this. It seems to be sort of creating a state where everybody is on an equal ground, so justice can be established, if that makes sense.
I just from my reading of it, I get to the end of this chapter and I am at a place with the word justice where every time they use the word, I have no idea what they mean, and so I don't even know what they're trying to establish.
Yeah.
If somebody says to me, justice is fair treatment or something, I'm not saying that can't be broken down in a Socratic way further, but I can operate at that level and at least kind of get a sense of what you're talking about. I'm so lost with what they're talking about.
Right.
I don't know what they're trying to do.
Well, they're trying to define it, which is why I think I mean, that's the thing is I think...
But like it, in a sense, a word can mean anything. It's just a sound.
Sure. I mean, well, yeah, okay.
Well,
but you know...
No, but seriously. So they're trying to define it. So there's people putting forth definitions, I guess, and Socrates pointing out how those definitions have various inconsistencies.
Well, ultimately, I think they're trying to define how one can live a life most ideally. And
what I would ask Socrates is, are there any definitions he knows of that have no inconsistencies?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why maybe I was saying we should like read the book on words. I can't remember which it is.
I think that would be good.
Yeah, I'll figure it out before the end of this and then clip it.
So what about you? I feel like I have 3 questions for you. What do you think justice is? And then I forgot the second one. It was a good question. I forgot it. But yeah, what do you think justice is?
Well, no, I mean, I'm sort of the opinion that it's like you can't really define it because it is subjective.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's whatever somebody feels like.
It's like greenness or something.
But that's why I kind of agree with the idea that it has to do with goodness and injustice has to do with badness. So it's like anytime you feel like a bad has been occurred, that seems to be injustice. And every time something good occurs, it almost feels like that's just, you know?
Right.
But that's a very, does that mean everything that's good is just? And
are they the same thing?
What?
Good
justice and goodness? Yeah. I mean, I think justice might be a subset of the good.
So there could be good things that might not be just.
Maybe.
But there aren't just things that aren't good.
I think so.
Nice. Do you think justice is worth pursuing?
Well, it kind of goes back at this idea that I think everything's worth pursuing with enough doubt. And it's just always good to question your motives.
It does
constantly.
sound funny though to say you should pursue good with doubt.
Yeah. Well, because it's, it's like, think about Hitler. Hitler thought he was doing a good thing, but if he had just stopped and maybe considered whether he was doing a good thing, he might have realized actually he wasn't doing a good thing.
But I feel like there's another semantic problem happening because there's what you think is good and there's what sort of is good according to God or the universe. And so there's a sense in which it can't be bad to pursue what is good, but you could be mistaken in your analysis of what is good.
Well, here's one thing. I think justice requires, again, a subject. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, it's like it's a thing of consciousness. And whether that subject is projecting justice to a God or to what they deem good, and, we could argue that that's the same thing, maybe.
Right.
It does require somebody to feel that way. And the reason I was getting at sort of feelings too, as like a good feeling or a bad feeling, because it seems like that always comes into play too. That's how we decide what the just things are or the unjust things are.
Right.
Is we see it and we say, oh well, that's that wasn't very just. That happened, that person just robbed that person. We kind of inherently know that that's, again, unjust, or you could use the same word as bad, and maybe they are the same. I mean, that's interesting. Is there anything that's good that's not just? Flying in an airplane? and it goes
It's
well.
good.
Well, but if it goes well, right? And then you
That's
say,
good.
well,
Is that good or is that okay? And then
No.
there's another question: is there a difference between good and preferable? I don't know. It's too far down for me. So I think your point about consciousness is actually a good one, because most people wouldn't say it's unjust if a bear eats a deer.
Right.
I mean, a deer definitely doesn't want to get eaten by a bear.
Right.
But
Right.
justice doesn't enter into the equation.
No. Well, and is it just for us to factory farm? Or is it just for us to eat plants?
Well,
You know?
people might say no. I would say
but
that
then-
people hold
yes.
us to a standard of justice for sure.
Right. Right. But they're sentient beings. And so that's why they're,
It's unjust for us to factory farm or eat plants, whatever, depending on your perspective, because we are responsible for
the death of something.
our actions and pursuing what is good and avoiding what is bad. It's not the cow's fault or the mushroom's fault.
Right. Right.
I
And
guess
so that's,
mushroom's not a plant, but
yeah, or, every moment we're killing billions of microbes,
right.
Is that
But
just?
I'd say that's closer to not being relevant to justice because we don't have the power to change that.
Right, but if you have a moral precept that anything, like killing anything is bad, any living biological entity is bad,
Right.
then by that standard, the act of living would be unjust.
Right. I think that there's probably people who think that. There's
I don't
people
know.
who are against living.
Well, yeah, sure. And they're not with us anymore. Yeah, but that's why I don't think you can really define it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's subjective. And it can be defined in the loose sense of somebody's good and somebody's bad.
Right.
But that is going to change for everybody. And again, I think that might be why Socrates went to the state, because it's like the state he is describing is trying to get everybody on the same page.
Right.
It's like bringing up
I get that, because I think having a subjective definition of justice makes it almost useless.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
If you have a legal code or something like that, like we in theory have, if you go through a red light, this is the penalty, and that is the penalty for everybody, no matter who you are and no matter why you've gone through the red light. Then yeah, everybody's on the same page, and according to the law, it is wrong to go through the red light.
Right.
Period.
Right. So stop running the red lights, Antushka.
Right.
Dude, can we talk about how so many people started running red lights during the pandemic?
Oh, did they?
Did you notice that?
No, I didn't. I noticed people started driving crazy, though.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. But I just feel like the number of people that just run red lights.
I feel like there's so many traffic cams, you'd get a ticket in the mail.
No, I mean, a lot of those, like at least in Texas,
Yeah.
I think they tried to implement that, and people
Got mad.
sort of got mad. Exactly.
Nice. They thought it was unjust.
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah,
it was. It is unjust until it's passed through the legal code, and now it's
Right.
just for them to do
Right.
it.
Exactly. The
It's
justices.
always funny to me when they talk about the police, like a justified killing.
or they're called justices.
Right. Exactly. A justice
Yeah.
of the peace.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, justified killing, right. Because there was some debt that was made that
Right.
allowed it to be paid with a life
Right.
based off of somebody's subjective decision.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I think that's probably the big conclusion, though, is that I think he's saying justice can't really be defined for everybody, but you can define it for people if you bring them all up in the same sort of society, and you can try to make an ideal society where sort of everybody is living, I guess, to their fullest extent and goodness that they're able to do.
Right.
But it's a little bit like, it's obviously utopian. I mean, but
well, it's really drawing on something, because I think that what they're missing in this conversation is that the word justice has emotional weight to it, because our society would feel a little bit different if, instead of having a legal code with Supreme Court justices that wore robes and sort of feel like these superhumans, we have a rule book, and we call it a rule book, and we say, these are the rules. If you break these rules, this is what's going to happen. And there's no morality to it one way or the other. It's like, these are the rules that we've deemed are necessary for our society to function. But we don't do it like that. We do it with justice and fairness and virtue, and we use these words that are laden with morality and religion and all sorts of things.
Right.
And, it feels like it has sort of a cosmic implication versus just a rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would agree with that, because, you're ultimately trying to coerce people to follow the guidelines.
And you're doing it from multiple angles, because you can do it with, you could call it a rule book and have a police force, and the rule could be you're going to go to jail, or you're going to get shot, or you're going to get a fine, or whatever. But then you do it from this other side about justice and lawfulness and all these things that are related to goodness, because lawful also, somebody who follows laws is seen as somebody who's good. Right.
Yeah, no, and again, what's the purpose of all of these laws is to create some kind of cohesion and to get people to all follow a similar rule. So everybody, I think, inherently understands, whether or not they realize it, if that makes any sense, is that, they are all guidelines. All the laws are really guidelines. It's just, are you willing to sort of suffer the price that was put down by the state to do them? But you can go out and do anything.
Back to Rose Wilder.
Right, I know, but yeah, it's true. Yeah. But you are able to go out and do things. And so adding this sort of cosmological element of it, I think, does sort of get more people to follow the guidelines than if you did call them something different.
Because it's not just that you're choosing to go to jail for 30 days. It's that you're doing something wrong. You're doing something bad.
Right. And then you're going to have a moral quandary about it on top of just the
because our special people who wear robes have deemed it good.
Right. Or you could decide, the populace has decided it, and it's like the group has decided it.
Although the populace doesn't vote on laws usually.
No, I know, but that's the idea, right? I guess. Right. And in some cases that was the case, right? But I guess Moses was just one person. But then, look at even that, right? Let's just imagine that Moses didn't actually talk to God, but he just knew that he had a God-feering people. Yeah, he came down.
He just carved out some stuff on the plates. Yeah.
This is a way to get people to follow the rules. Because, again, it's, if you want to look at it from a biological standpoint, it's like, it seems like every entity is trying to work into aggregation. It's like every system does this, whether it's a bacteria making
into
a
aggregation.
Making a biofilm, right? Or our cells within our body working to make us, or us making a state. It's all seems to be survival instincts, because as you can get a group of biological entities to work together, they're more robust and they're able to survive for longer.
Right.
So, and this is the point I kept making about the anarchy stuff, is that it seems ideal to live, on your own. And maybe you could say the most ideal way to live is actually as a single cellular organism, right? But for some reason, we've aggregated slowly over millions of years.
Well, Lane talks about that too.
I don't remember that.
She says that the communistic perspective addresses an important problem facing humans, that the world is dangerous.
Right.
And it actually does it fairly well.
Right. Yes, and that's what I'm building up to, and that I've said repeatedly that anarchy works until a large organized group comes in and kills everybody and enslaves them or whatever. It's just that seems to be always what happens, whether it's in Athens, whether it's in the Wild West. I mean, the Wild West essentially got taken over by the government, right? And regularized and lawified.
Yeah, there's laws all over the West. It's crazy.
It's true. Have you been to Colorado recently?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. It seems like justice is something to get many people, or it's used to get people under the same banner.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the opiate of the masses. It's religion.
Maybe. It's a component of it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's such a depressing thought to me. I hate that.
Yeah, and it's not, again, though, it's not to say that justice can't exist in one person, right? We all have our own
moral compass.
Sort of moral compass and opinion about it, but it is affected by our experience and the things that we read and everything like that, and determined by that.
Right.
And yeah. I don't know.
I mean, it is interesting, the subjective nature of it, because I don't remember who... I feel like I hear often that people have an innate sense of what is just and what's not just. But even when you bring up the Israel-Palestine conflict, you ask one person, and they have a complete opposite sense of what justice is in this case.
Right. Which is why we can go back to Nietzsche, and this is why I was making the point that justice requires consciousness, and thus justice requires memory. And so if you take away memory, justice does not exist,
right?
In my opinion. And that's why, if you want to solve all of these long historical conflicts, people don't like that idea, but you in some ways have to give up your historical past if you truly want to,
Say again? Maybe I didn't follow.
If you want to solve historical conflicts,
right,
you need to give up the past.
Oh, I mean, that's always true.
Sure, but people seem to want to cling to the past.
I mean, it's the same. It's the same thing about you have a massive argument with a family member and you haven't talked in 5 years. The only way you're going to be able to have a relationship moving forward is to be willing to move forward and not exist in the past, in the fight from 5 years ago.
Right.
It'll never work.
Yes, but you say that as like it's obvious, but I don't think it's actually many people think about that idea. And, you could take the further approach that it's like the real way to get over tribal conflicts is for the tribes to mate. Because that, in a case, is making a common history, right?
Yeah, sure, fine.
Yeah, if you want to do it with history, I suppose.
Right. If you want to do it with history. Gross.
Literally. So I guess there's two ways. You can either become, have amnesia, or you...
Nice. I like having amnesia.
Or you find a way to combine the past, and one way to do that is to, mate, and then you are essentially merging two cultures.
I think it's hilarious to say you can have amnesia as if it's an option, like it's a choice. Like, I'm going to go amnesia.
Yeah.
I guess that's like taking the blue pill, right?
Sometimes I think about that, though. I mean, how much easier will our life... I mean, this is, again, though, it's essentially giving up consciousness.
There's a comedian that has a joke that it just made me think of about how stupid his brain is, because he's got a smart half of his brain and the dumb half of his brain. And, like you can make your day better by smiling more and kind of pretending like your day's better.
Right.
And the dumb half of your brain is so dumb because it heard you make that plan.
Yeah.
It knows that you're doing that on purpose and it still works.
Wait, what comedian was this?
This is Nate Bargatze.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Got to give credit, Antushka.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I mean... It's true that this is the downside to consciousness, is the equivocation on the past and the future.
What is the upside?
The upside is survival and everything that we see that we've made.
Airplanes, the internet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. So,
yeah.
Okay. So, what do you think the importance of this chapter or this book is for you?
That's a very good question. Well, one important thing is obviously the fact that it tried to lay out a utopian state, which was highly influential. And I think you basically see,
Book one?
This book, I thought you were talking about the whole Republic, but yeah.
Oh, no, I'm talking about our reading. But yeah, if you keep going.
It is tough to talk about one of the books in isolation, right?
Yeah.
You know, because this is setting the stage for everything that comes in the Republic.
Right.
And the way that Socrates got to defining what an ideal state was by trying to define what justice is.
Right.
And so that's, so there's an easy answer. The importance of it is that it led to that. And then the importance of the Republic as a whole is that it introduced and influenced the Roman Empire. You see the philosopher king and queen defined in here. And that's essentially what the Romans were trying to do with all their emperors. This is what Marcus Aurelius was, right? He was the philosopher king.
Right.
And you see it how they were brought up and everything to be well versed in all this stuff. And in book 3, he's talking about how you should be basically, because they talk about the guardians, which are of the society, because that's maybe the most important thing for the society to continue is having guardians that can protect.
Sure.
And just all the virtues that you need to imbue with them, like gymnastics for the body and music for the soul. And then this is where they go defining the types of modes that you should play, Phrygian and or whatever, Dorian.
Yeah, they have a weird relationship with music.
Right. And also rips into Homer a little bit and discusses some of the things that poets shouldn't discuss. But anyway, your point though, what's it for me is I think that it does get at this fundamental idea. I say fundamental too much in this podcast, but it does, that justice is indefinable. For everybody.
Right.
But I don't know if they necessarily get at that completely in the first book, but I think they do because it ends with Socrates being like, but I don't really know.
Yeah. What I find strange, I don't find it strange to try and pin down justice as a starting point for developing a society. I think it's as good of a starting point as any other, and it's actually there are other philosophers who have done that, and actually a book that I thought might be interesting for us to read is John Rawls's book on social justice theory from the 70s.
Oh man.
It's interesting. He introduces a concept called the veil of ignorance. I think we've talked about it, and a lot of people. It's a famous idea about how if you're constructing a society, it's important that you don't know what position you will hold in that society when you create the rules for that society. Mm-hmm. Which I think is it's an interesting idea. Anyway, but it's also a justice theory. He's coming up with an idea of justice as a precursor for how to structure society. Mm-hmm. What I'm confused about is if ultimately you don't think that justice has much of a meaning, why not abandon that as the precursor and go with something else?
Doesn't have a universal meaning. Other than potentially it's what somebody deems.
Right. Yeah. And so this is why I was saying I would be interested in asking Socrates, do you think that there's anything that does have a universal meaning? Because his whole like poking
Probably
holes and
not.
things.
I would say he probably would say no.
Right.
But I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
But he might also say that is I don't know.
Or have you found anything that has?
Sure. Yeah.
Is there anything that's airtight? Any term, any concept, any definition?
Yeah. Yeah.
Math is probably close.
Yeah, but I mean, this is
like arithmetic.
No, but I mean, but this is what Gödel proved, right? Is that if you know, when they tried to lay out the system of arithmetic, Gödel proved that there's ultimately a paradox in any logical system. And a paradox, I guess, in this sense, is
I don't know. I don't know this. I don't know what you're talking
about. Oh, yeah. Well, maybe we should read Gödel's proof.
Okay.
No. But yeah, no, I mean, this is a very famous proof in the early 20th century or mid 20th century, because these guys at the beginning of the 20th century tried to, again, I think it was with arithmetic, maybe it was algebra, I don't remember. But they tried to lay out basically from ground zero the system of algebra or arithmetic. And then Gödel came and showed that there's actually a paradox that lies within any logical system. Anytime you try to make a completely airtight system, there's going to be some paradox that arises.
Right.
And the reason that I bring this up is that it seems to me to mean that also you will always find an inconsistency in any universal definition. Which is, again, why I guess I would say that you can't define justice for everybody, I guess.
Can you define it for some people, for like 10 people?
You can define it.
If you can't define it for everybody, is it possible that you can't define it at all? Because justice to me, and maybe I'm wrong, my sense is, even what they're going for in the Republic, they're attempting to find a completely objective definition, something that works universally. And I guess I haven't read the second book, so I don't know. But the idea that justice is something that
justice,
right? I mean, I'm waving my hand around. I'm trying to give it weight on purpose because it's one of those words. It's an important word in theory. I actually don't think it's an important word, but
you contrarian, you.
If it's just subjective, that's great. It's like greenness, and who cares what my experience of green is? Nobody.
I care.
Come on, it doesn't matter at all because you have your own, and I don't care about that.
Whoa.
I mean, I care I care as much as like, I wonder if our versions of green are a little different. There's no way of knowing, and then that's the end of that.
Right, but I guess that's,
and it's just like a little fun musing. It's not worth anything.
I'm going back and forth here by saying like there's no universal definition of justice, but then I say like, but it does seem to be what somebody thinks is good or bad.
Right.
And again, that's not to say all good is just and all bad is unjust. I can't think of any examples of the counter, but they are different words.
One starts with a J, one starts with a G.
Yeah. Well, and also it's just good and bad feel like even more amorphous ideas than just and unjust.
But maybe that's better. Maybe what good and bad are better words, perhaps because they're displaying just how amorphous these ideas are. Because just feels more real for some reason. It feels a little easier to grab at. I want justice. I don't want revenge. I want justice. Whatever the hell you mean by that.
Freedom.
Exactly. Where's Mel Gibson?
I don't know.
Probably in Los Angeles.
Probably. Or in the back of some taxi.
What?
I remember his rant.
Oh, yeah.
It was in a taxi.
Yeah. Remember his right? Yeah.
Never forget.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's what I think, getting back to your question, that's what I think the importance of it is it shows, I mean, and again, this is what his ultimate goal is, right? As he laid out in his apology, is to, everybody says that they know what justice is. You have three people in this who very confidently said they know what justice is. Right. And then he just digs into it a little bit. And then very clearly it becomes realized that it's a very complicated question and probably doesn't have an answer. And we're able to get at justice and injustice when we, because we all have our own conceptions of it, and then we are able to agree with one another to an extent.
Right.
To get at a more global definition, but that will probably run afoul with some other group that has a different conception.
Right.
But it seems to me the one remaining truth between those is that each of them are doing what feels, or I'm now adding right and what feels not right. But I guess to be also taken as what feels good and what feels bad.
Right, but then there's different senses of good. There's moral good and there's good as in something tastes yummy.
Right, because, I mean, this is an example of maybe where not everything that's good is just, because you could say, there's
like
plenty
a popsicle's not just.
Well, and there's plenty of things that feel good that are not just.
Name
you know what I mean?
4.
Not on this podcast.
Everything that feels good to me is just.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
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 But that's no, but that's the point though, is that, I mean, I just answered the question of how, everything that is good is not just.
Right. But I would argue that's a different definition of the word good. I think it's two different. It's like a diverging. It's a word with multiple definitions.
Yeah, because it's an amorphous. But that's my point. Is it's an even more amorphous word than justice. Yeah. And is there one most amorphous word? Is that God? Maybe God is the most amorphous.
It's the most amorphous word.
Yeah, because this is kind of what I'm getting at. Is like how I'm thinking about words.
Oh no.
Is, if you want to think about it as the number of connections that they have within a brain, the number of associations, and that's kind of what I mean by amorphous. And so good has more connections to other words than justice does.
Sure.
But this is why it's so confusing, though, is because, everybody's brain is different. And so they're going to have a different constellation associated with good and just and unjust and bad.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Yeah. Well, what do you think the importance of this book is?
I mean, I think it's important to probe ideas that we take for granted. And I think that especially, I don't know about especially. I think that the term justice is thrown around a lot uncautiously and unthinkingly. And so I think it's important to probe the ideas that we are espousing to see if we know what we mean by them. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's just a very simple question of what are you talking about is something that I think, it's a value that I hold. I think it is a moral good to examine what you are talking about.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that.
I think it's great. I think the project is great. I just think it's way too long and it's confusing.
Well, and if you look at how long the Republic is, I mean, it's like 200
I know, the
pages.
idea of another, 250 pages of this is driving me crazy.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, okay, so we're going to do Theaetetus.
All right, cool.
Because they talk about words in there.
Cool. What does it mean?
A lot of these are people's names.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. It's a character in it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. The other one I thought would be the Timaeus, where they talk about Atlantis.
Oh, yeah. The lost city of Atlanta.
Of Atlanta, yeah.
From Futurama.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. That's a great episode. Man. Yeah. Yeah, no, but, I think he might address some of your questions about, like, what are words? Is there a universal meaning and stuff like that?
Right.
Because it's sort of talking about knowledge, basically. But, yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Any fun Reddit updates?
I didn't realize you posted. You didn't tell me, but I went and checked, and I saw that same guy was giving you heat again on that capitalism v socialism.
Oh, really? Wait, who was giving me heat?
You responded. I don't know. I don't want to whatever.
What was the comment?
It was like, well, first off, it was just funny. This person just obviously doesn't know how to articulate themselves very well, because it's just they use like 3 negatives, like it's like triple negatives. But it's like, nice. Can you not give a definition of or give a little reason for why what you're posting in this subreddit is relevant?
Little snippy.
Yeah. And then you're like, to be honest, no, I just like the banner.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. Yeah. And I mean, you got responses, so it's like again, the person's just hating.
Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Who cares? You're much better built
I thought
for
that
this.
The music one from last week was the funniest we've gotten so far.
Oh, yeah. Did we not talk about that?
No, not yet.
Oh, yeah, because
we didn't have it yet.
I called him a silly goose. Did
funny.
You see my... You should read my response.
I upvoted your responses.
But did you see that? I was like, you silly goose. That's the whole point.
Oh, man. It was pretty funny that he didn't think we were musicians.
Yeah. Well, and I know they just wanted me to take the bait and say, we are musicians. So yeah. I didn't do that.
We are musicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's by whose definition, you know?
Right. That was pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, somebody was saying, why would I listen to a bunch of non-musicians talk about arranging? Where if anything, we're like the most, or at least, like 2 out of the 3 of us were, you guys were.
We all have degrees in music.
Well equipped to talk about music, if anything. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And yet we only do 1 episode on it. Yeah. That's okay.
Well, we convinced people that we don't know anything about music, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they listened.
Maybe. We got a lot of listens on that episode, though.
We did. So, yeah, honestly, maybe we should go back to music.
It was pretty good. I was surprised because I posted kind of late because Thanksgiving and all that. But
yeah, no worries.
I was surprised a little bit by some of the responses from this last week's post, because it was when we were talking about the defense, the apology.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a pretty uncontroversial take. That it's sort of wrong to speak things that you know nothing about, or that you know that you don't know, to claim to have knowledge that you don't possess. And I think for the most part, people seem to be agreeing with it. But there's been more people disagreeing with that idea than I would have expected. I thought it was basically an uncontroversial idea.
Well, I think that they were, especially like in the capitalism v socialism, I feel like people are like, well, who are you talking about here?
Right. It's like, I'm obviously talking about the socialist.
Yeah, right, or the capitalist, or whatever.
Or right, because there was that person with the cosmologist, as if I was like picking on cosmologists.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that was a ridiculous response. Yeah,
the whole time I wanted to change it to cosmetologist.
Yeah. No, but well, and it's interesting because I while it is a sort of uncontroversial idea, I do think the way that you posed it, which again doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I mean, I think you should pose it so that you get a little bit of a response, which you did. Although I would agree that you didn't get many upvotes on this last one.
No, I fewer than any of them. Actually, This is the worst. I've gotten the least karma. It's the worst so far. Which makes no sense to me.
Well, it was also a question of whether they were the right subreddits, right?
I couldn't find the right subreddits for this one. Actually, and I'm not sure where to post this.
No, I mean, I don't know.
Obviously, it did not really an anarcho-capitalist or comic socialist versus capitalist.
Yeah.
By the way, just the socialist versus capitalist subreddit is absurd.
It really is. And just the fact that so many people camp in it and respond to stuff.
They get so mad.
Yeah, I mean, these people, they're all on blood pressure medications.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, the problem is it's like the philosophy subreddits, I think, are going to be more guarded with stuff and like probably don't want self-promotion of podcasts.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been now kicked off of a few of them.
Oh, really? Which ones?
Our philosophy, just the standard philosophy one. The other one was like Ask Philosophers.
When you say kicked off, they banned you?
Yeah, or like a 90-day ban from posting.
That's funny.
Our history won't let me post.
Yeah, I was going to say you should have. Yeah, I noticed they were not having it from the get-go. Yeah. That's okay. We'll get them. Yeah. Once we're the biggest podcast on planet Earth, they'll all wish they had let us post in their subreddits.
Joe Rogan, watch out.
Yeah, that's right.
We're coming for you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Anonymous, no video.
Well, No Agenda doesn't do video.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're not the biggest podcast, though.
No, but they're the first. They're not the first podcast, but one of the co-hosts invented the RSS or wrote the RSS protocol.
Well, that's. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's very cool. Right. But to say that you're the first is always because it's like
No, they're not the first podcast, but he was in the team, or there's like two of them that made the protocol for.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember being in high school and hearing about podcasts and then being like, isn't this just a radio show?
Right. Yeah.
It's like, at what point are we just, it's basically just radio. It's not even a different medium,
Right.
So, whatever. It doesn't matter. Who cares?
It doesn't
We're
matter.
the first. We'll just start saying we're the first. How about that?
Did you see the link I sent about the anarchy without hyphens?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have a chance to read it.
No, it's okay. I feel like it's really short. We could almost do like a mini episode, a bonus episode or something.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, or I mean, if we get back on anarchy, we could sort of bring it into that.
We shouldn't do that.
Well, I don't care. I mean, we can, are you tired? Are you tired of anarchy?
Tired of anarchy.
But yeah, so we'll do Theaetetus, however you pronounce it.
Yeah.
We'll get the pronunciation down by next week. And yeah, no, I mean, I feel like potentially like if there's like subreddits about maybe, I don't know, justice, law.
Law. Oh, that's interesting. That's a good idea. Maybe start going in the law direction. Yeah.
Meaning kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Get a bunch of lawyers mad at me too.
Oh, that's okay.
Every time I post on a new subreddit, I'm like, it's a new group of people who can be mad at me about something.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Like, no, that's not true. Oh, you idiot. It's been not true since the dawn of civilization. Do you not know anything about all history?
I know. I love the do you not know? I mean, it seems like you don't know.
I don't know anything, man.
Yeah. No, you're definitely built for this more than I am.
It's just so silly to me.
It is. It's true. It is silly. Yeah. Cool. Any other fun things?
Fun? I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay, cool. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. More Socrates next week. Tune in next week.
We'll finish them up.
Yep. All right.
Or Plato, whatever you want to say.
Right. Whatever.
Play-Doh.
All right. See you.
All right. See you.